Guys, let me tell you a little story here about immense corporate greed and how it's destroying this country. So you all are familiar with the company Boeing, and they make planes, and they're competing with this foreign company named Airbus. And in the midst of competing with them, trying to come up with the next great plane that they could sell to countries all over the world, they decided, you know what? We need to cut corners. We need to cut corners to make more profit. And, well, that had some really, really negative consequences, didn't it? So you had the Boeing 737 MAX plane. They premiered it well before it was actually ready, when there was a problem that they knew the plane had. And as a result of that, you had 2 plane crashes where large numbers of people died. I believe the exact number was 346. So here is a breakdown for you as to exactly what happened. And this is really eye-opening. Then I'll tell you what Trump just did about Boeing. Watch this.
This is an airplane engine. It's sitting in a field in Bishoftu, Ethiopia, part of the wreckage of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, which crashed on March 10th, 2019. 157 people died. This was just a few months after another flight, Lion Air 610, crashed in Indonesia and killed 189 people. These 2 flights were operating the same plane, the Boeing 737 MAX 8. And its engine is the key to understanding why this particular plane has caused so many problems. But there's nothing actually wrong with this engine. In fact, airplane manufacturers race to put them on their new planes. That's where the problem started. The 2 biggest airplane manufacturers in the world are Airbus and Boeing, and they have a fierce rivalry. If one of them can offer a better plane, the other could lose a lot of money. That's exactly what was about to happen in 2010. Airbus announced that they would update their most popular model, the A320, a single-aisle airplane that services many domestic flights. You've probably been on one. For this new plane, Airbus had a big update. It would have a new kind of engine. It was much larger than the previous engine, but it would make the plane 15% more fuel efficient. And just as importantly, this upgrade wouldn't change the plane that much. A pilot could walk into the new model with little additional training and be on their way. It was called the A320neo, and it would save airlines a lot of money. This was a problem for Boeing. To compete with Airbus, Boeing's obvious move was to upgrade the engine on their single-aisle plane, the 737. But there was one issue. Here's a sketch of the 737 next to the Airbus A320. Notice how the 737 is lower to the ground than the A320. This meant Airbus could slide a new engine under the wing of their A320, but there wasn't enough room under the wing of the Boeing 737. But a few months later, Boeing's product development head had big news. He said, "We figured out a way to get a big enough engine under the wing." Their solution was to move up the engine on the wing so that it would be slightly higher, and it would fit on their 737s. Here's a promotional video of that updated 737 in the air. You can actually see that the top of the engine is above the wing. Boeing called this model the 737 MAX. And just like Airbus with the A320, Boeing said that their new plane was so similar to its predecessor that pilots would only need minimal additional training. The 737 MAX became the hottest selling plane on the market. And it helped Boeing keep up with Airbus. Except moving the engine up on the 737 had a side effect. When the 737 MAX was in full thrust, like during takeoff, the nose tended to point too far upward, which could lead to a stall. This was a problem because these planes were supposed to behave exactly like the old ones. So Boeing came up with a workaround. Instead of re-engineering the planes, they installed software that automatically pushed the nose downward if the pilot flew the plane at too high of an angle. They called it the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS. But because Boeing was selling the 737 MAX as pretty much the same plane as the 737, they didn't highlight the new MCAS system. Many pilots only got a 2-hour iPad course before entering the cockpit for the first time.
Oh my God.
And the training material didn't mention the MCAS software.
Oh my God.
In 2018, several American pilots complained to the federal government that the 737 MAX was suddenly nosing down. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 took off from Jakarta. In the flight report, which shows the plane's altitude over time, you can see that the plane was in full thrust during takeoff. But at a certain point, the nose of the plane kept lurching downward. The pilots couldn't figure out why this was happening. The captain asked the first officer to check the quick reference handbook. They couldn't find the solution. The pilots continued to fight with the MCAS. The plane struggled to gain altitude. Reports show it was likely because the computer was getting incorrect sensor data, pushing the plane toward the earth below. 12 minutes after takeoff, the plane crashed into the Java Sea.
My God.
In the Ethiopia crash, the report shows that the pilots were actually able to disable the MCAS, but it was too late to overcome the malfunctioning MCAS sensors. For now, nearly every 737 MAX 8 in service has been grounded, and the Federal Aviation Administration is facing scrutiny over how they rushed this plane through certification. Boeing's response has been to apply a software update that makes the MCAS less aggressive, while also saying they'll increase pilot training on how to turn it off. This problem started with the company's race to compete with its rival. It pushed them to pretend like their new plane behaved exactly like their old one, even when it didn't.
They rushed it through because all they cared about was profit. They needed to compete with Airbus. They bought off the federal regulators, so they won't blow the whistle on it. This story gets darker and deeper. Ready for this?
The Boeing 737 MAX still grounded after 2 deadly crashes. A whistleblower is going public to NBC's Cynthia McFadden, saying he warned the company about production problems before those planes went down.
What did it feel like the last day at Boeing, the day you retired?
Felt like I was abandoning the Titanic.
After 30 years in the military, much of it spent in an airplane, Ed Pearson, once a commanding officer, has a strong sense of duty. Why did you decide to come and talk to us, to come and testify later this week in front of Congress?
Well, actually, wasn't my plan. I feel like I didn't really have a choice.
Bottom line is you're worried about people dying in Boeing planes.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 2008, Pearson went to work for Boeing at their massive plant in Renton, Washington, where all the company's 737s are built. The 737 was a magnificent airplane, great safety record. Were you excited to work for the company and to be part of the 737 production?
I could not want to work for Boeing. It's an amazing company.
But in late 2017, as production of Boeing's new 737 MAX ramped up, Ed Pearson says he started to see things that alarmed him.
It was just out of control, and it was ridiculous.
The race to build the new planes and compete with Europe's Airbus pushed the production schedule into overdrive, he says. Instead of 47 planes a month, 52 were being built. So how much overtime was going on at this point? Did it double?
More than double. You work 7 days straight, you're beat, and you're tired.
He says during this period, many people worked weekend after weekend as there weren't enough engineers or electricians, and some ended up doing jobs they had never been trained for. A perfect storm for production problems, he says. He sent this email to the head of the 737 team in June 2018, expressing his concern that workers were inadvertently embedding safety hazards into our airplanes. I know how dangerous even a small defect can be to the safety of an airplane. He says he urged the Boeing manager to shut down the factory for a few weeks to straighten things out. And what was his reaction to that?
And he said, we can't shut down. And then I kind of got mad and said, I've seen military operations shut down for a lot less.
What was his reply to that?
Something I'll never forget. He said, well, the military is not a profit-making organization.
Military is not a profit-making organization. They're just admitting it. They're just admitting it.
What would you use to describe that factory at that point?
Dangerous, unnecessary, taking unnecessary risk, chaotic. Disarray.
4 months later, a Lion Air 737 MAX crashed, killing all 189 people on board. And the irony that when you wrote that first letter, that Lion airplane was on the factory floor.
It was within our production system at the time. When I saw that was, I really can't say. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. I cried a lot.
Did you?
Yeah. I'm mad at myself because I felt like maybe I could have done more.
Over the next several months, he reached out to Boeing's CEO and their general counsel, but felt nothing was being done. 19 days after sending this letter to the Boeing board, a second 737 MAX crashed. Afterwards, the 737 MAX was grounded. Boeing has acknowledged mistakes, including that their anti-stall system contributed to both crashes. Pearson says he doesn't know if what he witnessed contributed to the crashes, but it's the uncertainty that disturbs him.
Somewhere in the end of my letter to the board, I said, no one wants to wake up one morning and hear of another accident, and that's exactly what happened.
What do you say to Americans who are planning to fly on a 737, even in the next few weeks?
My family's in the same boat. I would demand that the FAA, in their role as regulators, go in, thoroughly investigate that factory.
So, Cynthia, what is Boeing saying about all this?
Well, Lester, while the 737 MAX fleet are all grounded, there are more than 6,800 other 737s flying. Now, Boeing is pushing back strongly tonight, saying that the 737 is one of the safest planes flying. And they say, quote, the suggestion by Mr. Pearson of a link between his concerns and the recent MAX accidents is completely unfounded. And they say so far, no investigators have found, quote, production conditions in the factory contributed to the accidents.
So what happened here is very simple. Boeing cared about profit. They rushed this thing through. They didn't fix the glaring problem with the sensors that led to these crashes. They were warned in advance about the safety issues involved. You're only getting a small piece of the picture here, but you get the gist of it. The gist of it is all they really cared about is profit. Buy off the regulators. Who gives a fuck? Rush this thing out there. We heard nightmare stories of the people who build the planes taking parts out of dumpsters and using them on the planes. I remember covering that not that long ago. So what we're looking at here is corporate criminals. We're looking at people who are corporate criminals who have the blood of 346 people on their hands. That's what we're looking at. Somebody needs to go to prison for this. The executives at Boeing should go to prison over this. Prison. I don't fly in Boeing 737 Maxes. You shouldn't either. When I see it's an Airbus, I'm like, oh, now I don't like flying at all, period, but bet your ass I'm going Airbus over fucking Boeing. With neoliberalism rotting this country from the inside out, where it's always deregulation, it's always profit over all else. Well, this is the logical end result of that. So now the executives at Boeing are criminals. They should be locked up. In fact, the families of the victims sued them. They sued them, and they're trying to take their asses down and bring justice. Ready for this? U.S. proposes dropping Boeing criminal charge. U.S. prosecutors may drop a criminal charge against the aerospace giant Boeing, linked to 2 crashes involving its best-selling aircraft, the 737 MAX. In an online meeting with relatives of those who died in the 2 accidents, officials for the Department of Justice said they were considering allowing the company to sign a non-prosecution agreement to settle the case. The move would avoid a trial over the criminal fraud charge that is due to begin in June, after a judge rejected an earlier settlement in which Boeing had agreed to plead guilty. Lawyers representing families of the crash victims said they were deeply disappointed by the new plan. So this is the Trump regime siding with the murderous corporate criminals at Boeing. That's what this is. This is what you get from a government that's completely and utterly and wholly owned by big business. This is what you get. I don't have enough negative words in my vocabulary to describe what these people are and what they deserve. I get banned if I told you what they deserved. Like I said, a total of 346 people died in Boeing 737 MAX plane crashes. That includes 189 fatalities in the Lion Air Flight 610 crash on October 29, 2018, and 157 fatalities in the Ethiopian airline Flight 302 crash on March 10th. These figures are consistently reported across multiple credible sources. Then I asked how many whistleblowers died recently. How many Boeing whistleblowers died recently? 2 Boeing whistleblowers died in 2024. John Barnett, age 62, died on March 9, 2024 from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, ruled as suicide by the Charleston Police Department. Joshua Dean, age 45, died on April 30th, 2024 after sudden illness involving a MRSA bacterial infection, pneumonia, and influenza B. No evidence suggests foul play in either case, despite speculation on social media. One of them died literally right before they were supposed to testify against Boeing. This is who Trump's siding himself with. He's aligning himself with Boeing corporate criminals who are directly responsible for people being killed. This country immediately needs to go back to actually believing government is there to help people, to do good by people, to keep things safe for people. Because if we don't, this nightmare is only going to get worse and worse and worse, where nothing anywhere is safe and nobody cares about what happens to you or your family in the slightest. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.